you a music educator feeling the weight of traditional grades? Do you wonder if there's a way to foster genuine musical growth, not just chase points? In this episode, we will explore how you can stop grading everything to make room for authentic learning. Welcome to Pass the Baton, Empowering Students in Music Education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover. We're so glad to be with you again today. Oh, Kathryn, how are you doing over there?
Pretty good.
Illinois?
It was nice 50, and then tomorrow it's going to get back in and act like it's winter. So I had a nice couple of few days. How about you? How about you, Theresa?
Yeah, it's been beautiful here. It really has. And so today I got the opportunity to sub in a elementary orchestra classroom all day.
Oh.
It was quite a lot of fun. There was a neat moment when I got there and I got the plans out, and the teacher had left awesome slides. So, and it said, student-led warm-up. I went, yes! Yay! And so each class that came in, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go because I'm a sub and, I don't know the routine, but each class that came in, I said, okay, we have a volunteer who wants to lead warm-up. All of the hands shot up and they were just all so excited, and they get up in front of the class and it was really neat. I don't get to see that side of it as much right now. So it was really special to get to experience that with the students. And I sat in the ensemble and I played my violin and
yeah. Oh, that's fun. That's
a good moment. Good moment. Yep. And then of course, another good moment tonight with our guest, Chris Gleason.
Yeah.
Treat.
He's just so interesting to listen to. He's funny. It just makes learning fun, but has amazing things to say and really good questions to kind of get you thinking about assessment and grades and what are we doing to kids, and our students, what happens when we give them that grade, so
yeah, it was a lot to think about, and just even thinking about things that I'm doing this semester with the college class I'm teaching and how I'm grading them, and is this authentic? Are we just slapping a number on it? And part of it is they're college students, they expect a grade, and they from day one are asking, how do I get an A? So trying to think about how I can flip that mindset that the grade isn't what matters. It's the learning, it's the experience, it's the reflection. And Chris gave some really good ways to think about that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you, again, I love those ideas of like, sometimes we just kind of get stuck in that, well, I can't. This is the rules and I can't. And it's like, but there's so much empowerment for you as a person and teacher when you can start to say like, but there is room in my room. There is room in my curriculum. There is room in what I do with the kids that I have control over. And there is a lot of awesome things that you can happen there and shift there. So it's a good combo.
Yeah, for sure. Throughout, Chris mentioned a ton of different books that he recommended, which are now all on my shopping list, of course. But we're going to add those to, we have just a Pass the Baton reading list, things that we've read over the years that have been really influential. So I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. So if you're interested, again, direct links to the books that Chris mentioned, and then just some other ones that we've really enjoyed reading over the years.
So before we get to today's interview, we want to remind you that you can support Pass the Baton and get awesome perks.
Join the coffee club for as little as $2 a month and unlock discounts, free resources, planning parties, and more. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more.
Hey, all right. Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad to be joined tonight by Chris Gleason. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Doing good. So Kathryn and I were talking before you joined us. It's pretty cool that, you've been around Pass the Baton almost since the beginning when we reached out and said, hey, you want to write a foreword to a book you've never read? And for whatever reason, you said yes.
I don't know what you're talking about at all. I have no idea.
That weird book just appeared in your home.
right
Yeah.
there. It's always within arm's reach. And that's, listener, that's what I would say. Just carry it around and then you're good to go.
Yeah, I like that. Keep it right there in your pocket.
That's it.
Yeah,
Podcast
well-
over. All right. Thanks for having me. All right. You're out.
Well, we very much appreciated that, and we've appreciated seeing your work over the years, and Kathryn's had the opportunity to take classes with you. So yeah, this is going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's
well-
a terrific book.
Yeah. So before we kind of dive into the topic of the night, can you maybe tell us, who are you? What do you do? What's your background? What are you up to these days in Music Ed?
Well, my background, I think is fairly similar to a lot of ours in many respects. I mean, I grew up in my dad's band room, and my first goal in life was to be the tuba player in the Canadian brass. And as you can see, that didn't work out. And Chuck, I love you. Just keep going, buddy. It's great. But that was kind of the big goal for a while. And then went to University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. My wife, another music educator, much smarter than I. We met in music theory, and again, I went up to her and I'm like, "Hey, I know 2 chords, and I've gotten gigs knowing 2 chords. And so, can you help me out with this Neapolitan thing? I don't know what that is." First job was in a little town, East Troy, Wisconsin, and I must apologize to that school district. I'm sorry. I probably should pay you back. I mean, I learned more than those kids did. But and then I went back to my hometown of La Crosse and actually took over for my dad when he retired. And he didn't clean out the office though. So people, if you think that's a good thing, he just left it all there. So I was cleaning stuff for a number of years. And then we moved back to my wife's hometown, which is Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and I taught there for 18 years. So that was a big chunk of my time, and it was wonderful. And then there's an opportunity to work for the Department of Public Instruction, and in the role of that I'm in now, which is the Arts and Creativity Consultant, which is really a fabulous job because you stoke that curiosity and get to go see schools across the state, and not just music, but art and media art and theater and dance, and so it's a wonderful, great team, and yeah, so. Do that and do a little nonprofit work on the side, and there you go. That'll about do it.
Sounds like you managed to keep busy.
Yeah, never bored. Never bored. Nope.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Theresa had mentioned that another thing you do is you teach classes at Vandercook College of Music. And I'm currently taking one with you, Ungrading, which really caught my attention, something I've been to dive a little bit more deeper into. So I wondered if we could just start with, can you kind of explain what ungrading is and how it's different from traditional grading?
Yeah, and your last assignment was excellent, Kathryn. I gave you.
Oh, thank you.
Is she going to get extra credit for this?
Oh, okay.
But you came in late, and I didn't think you had a real good attitude, so that's why I knocked you down. I mean, but kind of proves a point though, too, right? And that is for so many years, I feel like I'm battling the system as an educator that, I was forced to put labels on my students, and I'm an awful teacher. I got better a little, but, like when I first started, again, if a student didn't act a certain way, or I was grading all sorts of strange things, like I kind of tell the story, and this is not made up. My students would come into my classroom, sit down, and I would do one pass going up and down the rows just to check if they were there, and they got points for, being there. And then the second time around, they put the instruments together and I give them points for doing that. And then the third time, it's like if they were breathing and, had a pencil, a lot of points for pencils. Oh my goodness. I've given thousands of points away for pencils over the years. Not to say that's not important, but, at one point, as I'm doing 3 passes through the ensemble, we're 15 minutes into a 40-minute period, Betty, God bless you, Betty, wherever you are, stood up and looked at me and said, "Are we going to effing start playing?" And it wasn't quite exactly that way. And I said, "I'm going to go get in the fetal position and cry for a while, and then I'll come back and we can begin rehearsal." You see, I graded everything because I thought that's what teachers did. I just thought, I think we tend to teach the way that we were taught. And I had some fabulous mentors, but I think we've, at least, I feel like we're starting to question a little bit more nowadays some of the systems, interrogate the system itself. And that's kind of the concept behind this, is to just not take it at face value and say that this is natural and normal to rank and sort and label and put numbers on kids. I mean, how many of us want to be a number? Like when my principal told me I'm a 3.1, I'm like, yes, a 3.1. And he's like, you're kind of a jerk. And I'm like, no, I was really shooting for a 2.7. So thank goodness I'm a 3.1. And then I turned around and said, what number are you? And we had a great relationship. I make fun of it in a way, but it's kind of that point. It's that the complexities that we're trying to summarize with human beings, by the way, can't be distilled down to a letter or a number. It's just it's not good enough. And so it's not good enough anymore. We need to do the hard work of taking a look at the system that we're in and finding ways to learn and then to find better ways to make the system function so that it's what's best for kids, not what's best for adults.
Yeah. I think in the class, like reflecting, a key thing for me was like just the disconnect of the learning, the teaching and learning that is happening with the actual reported grade that goes out. There's like just a complete disconnect, which is horrible. Like that's not what I want, So how do we build that so that's a better thing? So
well,
and it's
go ahead, Theresa.
Sorry. I was gonna say, is part of the problem that it's very easy for me to see if you have a pencil or not, but it's not easy for me to see if you learned.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things, it's one of the premise that we talk about is like paying attention. Every strategy you do in your classroom is an assessment. Think about it, because you as the educator are watching your students grasp with whatever the concept is. And by paying attention to that, you're seeing learning in real time. Just like if you're watching a little toddler learning how to walk, you're watching learning happening. And so until one day magically, they take 2 steps and then they take 3 steps. I mean, so I think one of our jobs as educators is to observe, is to ask better questions, to get students to do more self-reflection, to own more of their learning, and to pay attention to what's going on so that we know what next best question to ask. See, my best teachers were the ones that knew exactly what's the next question because they were out in front of me. Like they knew the path. They could have told me like, dude, you're sharp. Instead, they're saying, what'd you notice? See, those are amazing teachers because they know where they want you to go, but they're having it come from inside you rather than being placed on you. And that's a difference.
Yeah. Well, as a learner, right? I want to be in the class where the teacher is letting me have this rich experience, right? Because I've done that too, where I've gone over and tried to help a group that's not struggling to the point where they're upset with each other, but they're trying. That's the fun part, right? They're trying to figure something out, and I'm like, guys, let me tell you. And then I'm like, Kathryn, be quiet. You're ruining it. But we have to step back. And sometimes as teachers, it's hard for us to do that, but we got to get out of our way.
Well, you do. But at the same time, I feel for all educators, because we're under a time crunch, especially arts educators.
Yes.
Like who feels like they have too much time with their students? No one ever in the arts has said, oh, I got plenty of time. Take 20 minutes. No, we're fighting for every second we can get. Because we want more time with them. We feel like we're barely getting enough to make things work. So I understand where it comes like, I have 40 minutes. I mean, when I left my last position, I had 38-minute class periods, and with 6th graders, 10 of that's just finding the clarinet reed or figuring out how to put the trombone together. But the point is that that time is a hard one because, again, that's the big... we can't buy them more of it. We can't bank it away. We can't save it. And it just keeps passing. So I do understand the necessity at times where it's like, we just got to go.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a cost to that, though. And we just have to remember what that cost is.
Yeah.
So if we're going to redo this system, and I can't grade on if you have a pencil and if you are wearing black shoes and if, all of like, what am I doing?
Well, I think the big thing is this is I think you need to start with why are we grading in the first place? Like that's a big question. Because when you really boil it down, what a lot of times what it is compliance. It's a power struggle. It's about control, right? And when kids are focused on the extrinsic, then they tend to reduce the quality of their thinking in wanting to do that in the first place. Like, for example, I always make fun of the Book It program, with Pizza Hut. Sorry, not a sponsor probably. But here's the thing. Their heart was in the right spot. But when they made reading all about getting pizza, see, now the focus wasn't the intrinsic satisfaction of reading in the first place, but it was about to get something else. The more that kids focus, or anybody, humans, the more that we focus on that goodie, the less interest we take in whatever we had to do to get the goodie. And that's not like an opinion. There's like 75 studies that have shown that. And so we have to be careful about the extrinsic, and grades are just a form of extrinsic motivation. So I think what we have to do is really think about why we're grading in the first place. And if it really is for growth and for learning, or if it's for compliance. If it's for compliance, I think we need to take a different look at that and say, okay, what am I afraid of? What am I fearful of? And what am I trying to manipulate? I mean, my kids would walk into class, and I think a lot of music educators do this. We've got practice charts, right? Because we were taught that way. I mean, I had practice charts. I had weekly practice charts. And so guess what? I did weekly practice charts until one night my wife looked at me and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm grading stuff. This is what we do. I got paper. And she's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, I know. So then I went to monthly practice charts. I'm like, this is great. A whole month, right? Until one day the kids are walking and I said, children, turn in your practice charts. And what did they do? They took their pencil, they sat there right in front of me, and they're like 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, right? Then they forged their father's name, and I grabbed the paper out of their hand. I said, come with me. And I call up their father and I say, hey, Jimmy just forged your name. To which the dad says, I signed it this morning. I'm like, you're lying to me too. I'm a minus 10 for lying to me. I mean, like, I was catching kids lying, and it was all about compliance. And so, I decided to do the very next best thing, which is I'd scare them into practicing. Well, again, Betty stood up and told me where to put that. And then I decided the next best thing is to do coercion and manipulation. So then I'll give you a cookie. I'll give you a cookie if you practice 20 minutes. And it worked. Oh, I could tell what the melody was finally. It was beautiful until the second week when the cost of business went up. And it was 2 cookies.
Yeah.
Until it got to a point I'm baking bags of cookies for my kids. And again, my wife walks home or comes in and says, what are you doing? I'm like, as I'm taking cookies out of the oven, I'm teaching. That's what I'm doing. And again, you're an idiot. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the thing is that are we doing this for carrots and sticks?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it's not going to work. For 25 years, I've tried all kinds of stuff, and my students taught me that at best, it's temporary compliance, but at a cost. And instead, we need to build intrinsic motivation, which stems from students have an agency, understanding that what they're doing is helping them to become better at something that matters to them. And at the same time that they're part of something that's bigger than themselves, because again, in our classrooms, especially, there's a mutual relationship. There's a synergy there. So focusing on intrinsic motivation and then capturing the great stuff that they do. When you give kids choices and you say, show me in any way that you want, that you understand this concept, they tend to rise way above what you would expect. When you don't make the practice chart about the minutes, but instead the content of what they're doing, where they've decided what the goals are and what they want to get to, then all of a sudden they're practicing a lot more than 20 minutes because it's not about the minutes. It's about the comprehensive, trying to get the comprehension and trying to understand and get to that next level.
I feel like you described a lot of my teaching history as well. I remember first job, the kids aren't practicing. What am I going to do? Practice chart, because that's going to solve the problem. And like you said, it didn't. But towards the end, of when I was in the classroom, especially with the elementary, middle school age. You say, okay, play me something that demonstrates you know this. And it went so much better. I had one kid play Christmas songs all year long. All year long. Didn't care. That's what he wanted to practice. And he did. And he learned all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was his choice.
That's right. Choice is powerful. Absolutely. I mean, how many of us want to be told what to do?
Rarely.
Well, I mean, yeah, we don't. It's like, give me some, and teachers especially, it's like, this is my classroom. Like, I need, and that's what I feel some of the burnout with teachers. It's like micromanaging. There's another good book, not as good as your book, but another good book called Trust and Inspire by Stephen Covey. And he basically is making the case that what's the opposite of command and control? It's trust and inspire. The best leaders are the ones that demonstrate trust and will inspire you to do more instead of micromanage, come in, from on top and say, this is how it's going to be. Like no one flourishes in that kind of oppressive environment.
Okay. Well, now you know what I'm going to the bookstore tomorrow for. Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
No problem.
You said
Yeah.
Stephen Covey, because he also did Leader in Me. He wrote the book. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was a great book too.
Yep. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you've got wheels turning, so we're thinking about this. So let's see. Like, what are some? You're giving students choice, right? You're trying to build some agency. We're not asking how many minutes they practice. Thank goodness. Really, nobody likes that.
Yep.
What do you notice? Trying to think about how to phrase this question. Like, what? How do the students respond? Like, what are you getting from them? What are they seeing?
Alfie Cohen, another great author when it comes to Punished by Rewards, and he's got great blogs and so on. But I've learned a lot from Alfie over the years because he's really pushed my thinking on this, and it's exactly that. He would say that studies have shown that the more students are thinking about how well they're doing, the less they have attention on what they're doing. And see, I made that mistake too. I mean, I would have a rubric for everything. There was a rubric for pencils. There was a rubric for breathing. There was a rubric for clothes. There was a rubric for, you know what I mean, showing up on time. You can make rubrics for everything. And again, Einstein said that, not everything that, important is measurable. And so you can't measure everything. And so my students, I think, really appreciated the fact that I said, look, we're not playing a game. The most important thing to me is that, one, you're getting a comprehensive look at things, that I might shift your focus and maybe have you look at things differently, but that you're growing. And at the end of the day, what I'm going to ask you to do is show me a body of evidence that says that you're moving towards those goals. And so I think as educators, I know that sounds all fluffy and all that kind of good stuff, but the key is that kids need to have some of that agency. And I mean, it's their education, right? And of course I had the standards. Of course I knew where I wanted the students to go. But something I think as teachers we don't do really well, and again, I don't blame anyone because time is it's pressured, but I don't think we're really good at diagnostic assessment. Like the three forms simplified: diagnostic, formative, and summative, right? We take a lot of time on summative. Oh, we want tests. We want to find out where they're at and then label them and color code it and all that kind of good stuff. Formative, they say, well, grading for learning. We're going to grade for learning. All that kind of, we rarely talk about diagnostic. It means who's in your room in the first place? What do you really know about those kids? What are their aspirations and dreams? Not just like what's their reading level, what level solo are they playing and so on, but really truly understand where they come from, what assets they bring to the classroom. I often tell the story of Claire, who played flute, and Claire could not play flute as a young flute player. It was rough. I'm like, Claire, how about tuba? Great instrument. How about tuba? She's like, no, I'm playing flute. I love flute. I'm like, but you can't make a sound. Okay. Well, one day after band, she came up to me and she goes, Mr. Gleason, I saw what you did today. I'm like, oh, what'd I do? And I saw how you put on the board one of the rhythms for a piece that we haven't even started yet. It's in the folder. I saw it, but that's the rhythm for that piece. And I'm like, oh, you got me. That's good. That's good. The next day she picked out another thing. And then until it got to a point where I'm like checking in with her, I'm like, Claire, what are we doing today? But here's the thing that was interesting about it. She had this capacity to dissect my pedagogy. She was more aware. She could figure out elements of music. Like she could put all those pieces together. And guess what? The skill part of her profile caught up. When she was a sophomore, she made the high school honors, band stuff for the state. And so like the flute playing caught up. But then that really made me think, how quickly do I judge students based on skill?
Mm-hmm.
And shame on me for doing that because our profiles as musicians is not just about skill. I mean, how about empathy? How about compassion? How about, the ability not just to read books, but also faces in a room? Like there are kids that do that exceptionally well. That you're having a rough day and they come up and they say, how are you doing today, Mrs. Hoover? Are you okay? I mean, like, kids have what's called jagged profiles, as we all do.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the same. In fact, listener, how many classes have you ever had that were the same? How many students? How many years? They're all different. That's what makes this so hard is that you get one year and you're like, got it. And then the next year you come back and it's COVID and you're like, okay, I know nothing.
That's the truth. Yep.
And even without COVID, you feel that way. So it's like, we got to do a better job of finding out who's in our room and not completely setting up a curriculum before we know that. Like, what's the worst example of that? College teaching. What I just did to you, Kathryn, I created a syllabus and I gave it to you. And I'm like, I don't even care who you people are. This is what we're doing. And it's not the best way to do that. Because again, I have you in my class. You know what I mean? It's like, you've written a book. You can teach this class. You know what I mean? It's like, you got to know who's in there. And then we craft the outcomes, the strategies. We pay attention to those strategies. We allow kids choice and we give them the opportunity to own their learning, to show and demonstrate what they know. And then guess what? Get out of the way. Because a lot of kids, again, I will say this, is that when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have a lot of kids right now who are desperately seeking just safety and security and food and clothing. Look, they're not at self-actualization. They're not in a place right now that they will probably even care about doing some of that self-reflection because they're just in trauma. And so take this with a grain of salt. If you're looking for something that's going to be like, this is going to work for everybody, we're educators and these are human beings. And so those kids who are prepared to learn and are in a good place, yes, that's what I've seen over my 25 years of teaching. For those kids who are really struggling just to meet the needs of a fundamental survival, no, but that's, again, our systems have to do a better job of helping those kids so they're ready to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
TED Talk over.
A lot.
That's okay. That's great.
Good. It's a lot, but it's also stuff we need to hear and stuff we need to think about. So that, it's appreciated.
Well, and I guess, so in the class, we're reading Hacking Assessments. And I think one thing that's really great about that book is it gives kind of like, here's the pushback you're going to get. And I'm pretty sure we've probably had some listeners maybe listening who are like, okay, yeah, but the third grade grade, but. So what are some like common things that you hear people say that are kind of like the pushback that you're going to have to kind of think through, I guess?
Yeah, no, the first one is, but I have to grade. I get it. I did too.
Yeah.
25 years of teaching. It wasn't like I was in a situation where it's like, yeah, go ahead, Gleason, do what you want. It's,
Right.
Of course, I still had to give a grade too, but here's Ben and Rosamund Zander wrote another great book. And in their book, they really talked about, okay, how can I tilt the game? And it's not a game, but how can I tilt the board so that I can place a little bit more control. You know, the thing is, when you close the door, education happens between you and the child, right?
Mm.
It doesn't happen in like where I work at the state office. I mean, your kids don't care what's happening there. You know what I mean? Like I usually walk into a classroom and the teacher introduces me, "Hey, this is Chris from DPI." And the kids are just blank. They're just like, what's a DPI? Dots per inch. I mean, what is that? And
Mhm.
so they don't care what that acronym is, and that's good. They shouldn't. Education is that teacher, really. You're the center of their universe. And so that's the way it should be. But in this book, it's called Art of Possibility, by the way, Art of Possibility. It really is a fabulous book because it made me think in a way like, what is possible? What choices do I still have in my deck of cards? And here's what I found out. My administration didn't care if I came up with ways to give better feedback. You see, what our kids are hungry for is not a grade, it's feedback. And so I just started asking better questions. And then I used something called Google Forms. I don't know, sponsor? Have you heard of Google Forms? Google Forms,
We're a
pretty
fan.
cool. I just used that tool because they all had Chromebooks, and I'm just like, okay, at the end of units of study, at the end of quarters and so on, I would have students reflect upon the standards, what we were talking about, the goals that we had, that they had set, and just ask them some really good questions. And then at the very end of it, I said, okay, based on this body of evidence and all the things that you told me, and based on this rubric that we created together, what grade would you give yourself? And you tell me, when those kids graded themselves, did they grade themselves easier or harder?
Yeah,
I'm
I would say
guessing they're
harder.
harder.
Yeah, I mean, I had to talk some off the let. I'm like, dude, relax, It's
Right.
not, let's just be real here. But see, the grading was was never the important part. What my kids started to learn is that it was about the feedback loop. It was about asking good questions and so on. And so that Google form goes to a Google sheet, right? And in there's an add-on called Autocrat or Formule. You just want a mail merge program. And then it mail merged it to a letter that I had pre-made that said grades are done. Here's all the reasons why. And then here's real feedback. And these are your kids' words. And the parents and caregivers, after a number of just 1 or 2 years, were demanding that instead of the
Mm.
grades. They're like, that's what I want to see because it's a lot more information than I was receiving otherwise. So think within the box in the system that you're in to find what moves you can make, but communicate. Communication's key. Communicate with the parents and caregivers, with the students, with the other adults and your colleagues, and let them know. Say it's action research, and just do one section and then add more. So I mean, be smart about it. But again, what's the philosophy? The philosophy is labels don't work. Carrots and
Mm.
sticks don't work. What works is relationships. And see, this changes your relationship with kids.
Mm.
It goes from being a transaction where I was making all those cookies and then one day said, "Hey, can you move those music stands?" And the kid said, "What do I get for that?" See, I don't want that relationship. I don't want a transaction. I want a human to human relationship where it's built on trust. And so that helps when you're doing feedback and when you're being a teacher instead of slapping numbers and labels and so on the student. So that's
Yeah.
what I would say. I would say find ways to do that.
Yeah.
I'm
One thing
glad
I
you.
heard you, oh, go ahead.
Okay.
One thing I heard you say though, Chris, was because grades are coming up, turning in grades for trimester 2 are coming up pretty soon. And I'll hear a lot of my elementary teacher friends say they exhaust themselves writing all these narratives, and they do, and they spend so much time, and they're lovely, they're crafted so lovely, and and they say like it's frustrating because we don't know if everybody really reads them. And what I heard you say is there's a narrative that but it's the students' words. And I think that's the piece that might be missing is like hearing your child talk about their learning and the child will probably want to go back and read it too. But like that part there, I think is maybe obviously missing in what we do currently. And that sounds like a really awesome shift.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And what I hear in other educational circles, and this is what's interesting about this job right now, is that I'll go to conferences that are not music or arts related, where it's just, different educational conferences and so on. And a lot of folks, are talking about comprehensive, or competency-based learning and then
Mhm.
project-based learning and so on. And it's just like, hey, we got this new thing, and it's where the kids create these projects and they demonstrate learning, and they do it like at a night where then the parents and caregivers come and they get to see the learning take place. And I'm like, that's a concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've been doing that for a long time. Now, again, there's a double-edged sword to concerts too. Fear takes over, and then we start programming crappy music, you know what I mean? And it's just like we do that because we don't want to look bad and we don't want kids to quit because our numbers are based on, look, I know all the fears. So we got to be careful that we don't bow down to the fear, but we have to have confidence in the quality of our teaching. But here's the other thing. It shouldn't be a show. It should be pull the curtain back. I used to stop calling them performances and started calling them informances. I know
Yeah.
we share that vernacular together, but that concept of really showing folks the beautiful learning that's taking place and all the facets of it. And, a lot of parents will come up and say, boy, that's not music when I grew up. Like you're talking about history and all sorts of I'm like, yeah, because I'm teaching kids. I'm not just keep teaching music. I'm teaching through music.
Yeah.
I had a principal years ago who, when I first got to school, informed me that the fourth graders did not do a concert because they weren't good enough. Like, oh, excuse me. He said, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna get together in the cafeteria and we're gonna set out chairs and we're gonna invite the parents and and it was an informant. So it's like they need a chance to show what they've been doing. They need a chance to celebrate that they've been working hard and to pull back the curtain, like you said. And obviously it was successful and the principal was happy about it, but we have to get rid of the idea that you can only show learning if it's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's showing growth is so important. We used to record our students' first notes on their instruments, and people are like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because it would be awful. I'm like, yeah, they weren't good at all because it's their first notes. But I said, what's cool about it is a couple months later, we'd show them that, and they go, oh, I've gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
See, that's talk about intrinsic motivation. When students can gauge their own growth, all of a sudden that lights a fire in them, right? And then you can also show it when they're a senior. That's really fun.
I've done that with ukuleles, like fifth graders, and hey, let's have a share with the fourth graders and have them come in and we can pair up with somebody. And kids are like, but I don't know anything. And I'm like, well, let's hold on. Let's talk about what are the things we know. And it's just helping them build their own confidence of like, oh, I do know how to hold it. I do know what a chord is. I do. Right. But sometimes they just don't always make those connections. So I see what you mean about getting those kids kind of to start talking about their own learning. There's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. I mean, I learned that from you too. I mean, you would say instead of engagement, it's really empowerment. And I love that. It's absolutely true. How can you empower your students to own their own growth and be able to demonstrate it? Because again, when it's personal to them and they're proud about it, look, teachers, when a student is proud about their work and they have that pride and they can't wait to show it, there it is. But why did that happen? Because they had some agency and some choice. It was relevant. I mean, my daughter, when she was in high school, was doing some math homework, and I went up to her and I said, "Hey, what you doing?" And she's like, "Math." And I go, "Well, what's the purpose of that?" And she turned around and she goes, "To get it done." And then from that point, I'm like, I never want my own students to say that. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
To get it done. It's like there has to be a tie to relevance and purposefulness. And if that's there, then again, then you've got some buy-in.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kathryn.
No, please.
I was going to say, is there anything on this topic that we haven't asked you that you think people really need to hear?
I would say one thing, and that is, I say it jokingly, but don't hand out rubrics. And usually people are aghast at that. They're like, what is wrong with this person from Wisconsin? He's too much cheese. Here's the thing. Here's why I say that. Because I wouldn't hand out any rubrics when I first started. I'd send the kids off to solo ensemble, and they come back crying because they're like, they graded me on intonation. I don't know what intonation is. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I'm an awful teacher. I am so sorry. Okay, sorry about that. We'll fix that next time. Then I would like teach them the rubrics and so on, but then they would come back and all they would care about is the score on the top. I'm like, look at all the cool writing, what they were saying. There's like, I'm a 2.
Mm-hmm.
So then I got to a point where I said, oh, I got an idea. I gave them a blank piece of paper. And then I asked the good question, which is, if you were the clinician and you were listening to My Pet Crow 32 times in a row, what things would you listen for? And now see, the kids were coming up with a criteria. Not only that, but also what excellence looks like. See, they're constructing the rubric. Instead of it being externally, extrinsically being placed on them, it comes from inside them. It's like a contract in a way. It's an agreement. It's that we all understand that. And so I would do that in my classroom where I would put projects up. I love that was one of my favorite days. I would put them up in my room and the ensemble would assemble and I wouldn't say anything. We just go through the normal part of the routine, and then eventually curiosity would take over and one student would be like, Mr. Gleason, what's all that stuff? Well, thank you for asking. And I turn around and I start reading it, and I'm reading all about the thing and stuff like that and showing it off. And they go, oh, that's cool. That's kind of a neat piece of artwork. And then they're like, what's that one with the cotton balls? And I pick it up and they say, well, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, what, why don't you know? I'm like, there's no paragraph or anything explain. I have no idea what this. And so what are the kids doing?
Yeah.
They're already figuring out like, oh, we should probably tell them what it is when we put our own projects. You know what I mean? They got to a point where they would start asking me questions of like, okay, well, when's it due? And I would look at them. I'm like, well, the concert's then. I'd like it a couple days beforehand. Then one day, the flute player in the front row stood up, turned around, looked at the ensemble, all dead in the eye, and said, okay, people, did you hear it? Let's get the projects like 3 days before the concert. Okay. So he has time to look at them. Does that sound okay? All right. And then she sat down. I'm like, that was fun. That was great. Let's do another one. Again, agency, ownership, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that goes along with, I was thinking this is where I heard it from. I heard it from you of the say yes to kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, or I don't, but you could have said it in the sense that like, when kids ask, can I do this? Let them lead.
Yeah.
That happened to me this week with like a student wanted to choreograph one of our musical numbers. And like, she asked about 2 or 3 times and I'm like, okay, I got to answer her. And I'm like, sure. You why don't you do the cheerleading part? And like, she came in with the notes and, and she was such a leader and she did it so well. And it was just like, and then she looked at me and she's like, well, are you going to videotape it and put it in Google Classroom for us so we can reference it later? And I'm like, oh, yep. But it was like, just saying yes to a kid and letting and stepping aside a little bit because there's a lot of things that can happen. They're awesome. So
yeah, just be careful, teachers, as you're listening to us talk about this. The mistake I made when I first started with some project-based kind of things and so on is they would make all sorts of stuff. I mean, I had cakes with multiple layers and stuff. And I would say to them, how does that relate to this piece of music? And they're like, I don't know. It's cake, though. Isn't that cool? And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's cool. That's good. But it didn't show me the answer. So you got to have, and that's another important part. This all starts with a great piece of whatever, literature, artwork, or something. Like it has to have quality. Okay. And then the second thing is that you have to have clearly defined outcomes. Where are you trying to get to with the students?
Yep.
And they can help with that, but you want to make sure you have that. And then the strategies and so on, so that you can say back to the students, this was the goal. Like I want you to prove to me that you understand how form is important, not only to the composer, but to the audience so they can understand the architecture of the piece. Okay, there's kind of a big outcome. How can you show me that? And so students can dance it. They can do this. They can do, you can think of 1,000 different ways to show you that. But you have to have clearly defined. Otherwise, they're just going to give you pretty stuff.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think Theresa and I've always talked to Theresa about like, it's my must-haves. These are the things that must happen, but you can help me get there. Or help us get there, right? But yeah, there's definitely has to be some must-haves. Yeah. Well, when we wrote Pass the Baton, we one thing we really like to have was that in our chapter, these things to try tomorrow. So, and they're just kind of quick, actionable ideas that I think people have reached out and said like they really appreciate. What's something you would say if they want to start this kind of process of really thinking about how they assess or they want to ungrade? What would be a thing to try tomorrow?
Sure. Throw away your rubrics. And two, I would, uh, somewhat kiddingly, but I would say take a look at them and then find out where the students could help build those in the first place. The second thing I would say is grade less. Like, I mean, and within the concept of what you have at your school, I mean, some schools are like you have to have 15 grades every week. And it's like, well,
Right.
then find others in your school that believe in this philosophy as well. And then go to I mean, you have to advocate. You absolutely do. So do some research, get some information, and then, make a point to say that, look, there's a lot of bias. Um, that's tied to this. I mean, when you go back and look at Kettle, Galton, Brigham, Tehrman, Taylor, Thorndike, you go back and you look at this tree that is based in eugenics and it's directly attached to some of the standardized testing and everything else. It's hard to argue like, yeah, there's no worries about this, And it's not like in education we're knocking it out of the park. It's like, no, we have to somehow continue to change and evolve this system to better meet the needs of these kids. I mean, look, the kids in kindergarten right now will retire in 2078. We
Or
can't even tell what 5 years is going to look like from now, much less 50 years from now. So it's kind of like, I just think it's our time. This is our legacy. How can we change the paradigm in the ways that we can without getting fired? How can we do it in our ways to get these things to evolve? Question everything. Start looking at it, do the research, and then start pushing in the ways that you can and advocate for what's best for kids. Because I can tell you that every one of us can remember our ACT scores. And I don't think it helped us.
Yeah.
I don't think that's who you are. And I don't think one number is ever going to do justice to that. So put that aside as far away as you can to the kids and focus on the learning, the relationships. Let that other crap go as far away from you as you possibly can.
Yeah. I also think taking your course is a great way to help. I do. I mean, but just to help if you're really in it, right? If you're really into it,
Unsolicited.
it's unsolicited. It's just, every week it's like just kind of diving a little bit deeper. So I do want to say it's a great course.
Well, that's very nice. And I am writing my own book because you both have inspired me that I need a book
Yay.
too. Maybe it'll be yellow. I don't know. Not as pretty. But yeah, it's called Beyond Measure, Ungrading Your Classroom. And it's, a lot of what we just talked about, but some more how-tos and some more philosophy too, so that when you want to make those hard conversations that you have something to sit back on and say, okay, take a look at that. So yeah, appreciate it.
that will definitely go to the top of the reading list when that comes out. So now I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, if people want to stay in contact with you because they want to also get the first copy of your book and or they just want to chat and talk more, how can they do that? What's the best way?
Sure. I do have a website, Chris P. Gleason at whatever on the web. You can email me at Gleason, just my last name, and then cmp@gmail.com. I run a nonprofit called Beyond the Notes Music Festival. You can check out what we're doing there and get involved with some cool stuff that we're doing there. And then, I do a podcast as well. It's not nearly as good and quality as this. Like this is well put together and produced and edited and all that kind of stuff. Ours is just complete. It's three complete idiots. And, I woke up one morning. I'm like, I know what the world needs. Another podcast with like three guys talking about their life. But we do bring in wonderful guests but it's pretty light and we make fun of each other. So if that's appealing to anyone, go for it. It's called Beyond
And the name
Artless.
of that podcast?
Yeah, Beyond
Beyond
Artless.
Artless.
It's like Smartless, but a lot worse.
Awesome. Well, maybe now you'll have 7 listeners.
Hey,
Wouldn't that
that'd
be?
good? Yeah, we got 6, so we can add at least one more. That's good. Yeah, one's a dog, but it's fine.
Thank you so much. This has really
Yes.
it's been wonderful. The wheels are turning just even at the classes that I'm teaching right now. thinking about like, what am I doing? How could I be doing it better? And yeah, so I'm excited, and I know our listeners will be too.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you both.
Thanks for joining us. If you have found value in our conversation, please hit that like button, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us grow our community of passionate music educators.